In our days, mentioning Iraq is often associated with violence and the context of war due to the recent events. Modern Iraq corresponds to where historical Mesopotamia once stood, recognized as the cradle of civilization, whose rich and complex histories has influenced and shaped the whole of humanity since the Iron Age. In Mesopotamia, the first forms of writing were discovered, the first written law, the first wheel, the first boat as means of transport, the oldest map dated 2300 BC, the concept of urbanization, the concept of time according to astronomical calculations, astrology, mathematics, and the counting system. But today we will talk about the city of Baghdad, the jewel city once called the Round City. In 762, Caliph al-Mansur decided that the third Abbasid Caliphate would need a new capital, and so it was erected Madinat al-Salam, the City of Peace, which remained for the next 500 years one of the largest cities in the world and a cultural center of the Islamic world. According to a legend, the Muslim historian al-Tabari is said to have claimed that an ancient prophecy preserved by Christian monks stated that one day a great city will be built by a lord named Miklas. When Caliph Mansur heard this, he was astounded, as it was his nickname as a child. A Jewish astrologer, the most knowledgeable there was, chose the most auspicious time for the foundation of the city itself. During his power, over 100,000 workers, engineers, architects, and carpenters erected the city of Baghdad in just 4 years, a city remembered for 4 main components. Its 6-kilometer circular shape, whose form is thought to have been inspired by the father of geometry, the Greek mathematician Euclid, the 3 concentric fortified walls, the 4 straight artery-like streets that crisscrossed the city complex, and the 4 immense iron gates that led to the 4 corners of the world. Huge sums were spent on the construction of sumptuous buildings, mosques, barracks, bridges, aqueducts, and fortifications, whose bricks could weigh up to 200 kilograms. Historians estimated that the entire project cost 18 million gold dinars. Mansur created the most perfect city. The location in which Baghdad was built was personally chosen by the Caliph and was strategically favored by water channels connecting the 2 main rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates. The round city was completed in 766. In the center of it stood the Golden Gate, the Caliph Palace made of stone and marble, in which long tunnels ran that allowed the Caliph to travel on horseback. In the distance was visible the palace's majestic green dome, topped by an equestrian statue, while next to it stood the Great Mosque. Each circle of the city housed different realities, the first, for example, housing the palaces of the royals and their servants, kitchens, barracks, and offices that dealt with matters of state. The city later branched out beyond the original plan and ended up encompassing large parks, meeting places, and ethnic enclaves, such as the Christian quarters adorned with churches, convents, and monasteries. Baghdad reached the apex of its economic prosperity and intellectual life under its successors, Caliph al-Mahdi and their respective Harun al-Rashid. Baghdad's glory, grandeur, and enormous wealth were considered unique throughout the world at the time. His administration managed to exploit the rivers for grain cultivation, and a brilliant system of canals and reservoirs drained the surrounding marshes. Harun himself is said to have thought of creating a canal from the Gulf of Suez to the Mediterranean Sea 1,000 years before realization, but was dissuaded from doing so for fear of facilitating the passage of hostile Western forces. In Baghdad, there were many bazaars and covered shops, along which all manner of craftsmen, marble workers from Antioch, papyrus makers from Cairo, potters from Basra, and calligraphers from Pekin plied their trade. The diet was traditionally well balanced, and food stalls sold lemon chicken, spit roasted lamb with cardamom, small bones dipped in honey, and rose jam. There were all kinds of spices. The meats were salted, smoked or pickled, cereals stored in silos, and vegetables and fruit were placed in airtight underground containers. In Baghdad, there were a large sanitation department, many fountains, public baths, and unlike European cities of the time, the streets were regularly cleaned and waste was swept away. Most households had water supplied from aqueducts, and some had underground cooler rooms. White curtains hung over windows to help cool the house. Long paths lined the Tigris, and marble steps led down to the water's edge, where riverboats all of kind docked along the quay. On the outskirts of the city were numerous suburbs with gardens and villas, some adorned with frescoes painted with lapis lazuli, maiolica panels, and ceramic wall tiles. Most houses were built with sun-dried or baked bricks, while the dwellings were cemented with mortar and clay. Because of the scarcity of wood, the furniture, which included beds, tables, and chairs, was largely unknown among the Arabs, except for the sofa, which often stretched along the sides of the rooms. Most people usually sat on cushions and carpeted floors. In Aaron's time, large private houses had huge bathing rooms, and there were many hammam. Baghdad had a large civil service staff to run the city, such as night watchmen, lamplighters, market inspectors, tax collectors, and a regular police force. People were also dedicated to sports and games such as horse racing, swimming in the river, and camel races. In the evening, palaces and ships on the Tigris lit up the darkness. In general clothing, the common people wore trousers held up by a rope, shirts with wide sleeves, while the richer people wore dresses perfumed with rosewater and powdered musk and leather sandals. The richest lady chose new clothes, used perfumes, wore jewelry, belts, silk veils, and wore eyeliner makeup. Baghdad was at the crossroads of trade routes on the Silk Road, where trade was conducted by land, river, and sea. Trade deals and typical products reached countries such as China, Indonesia, Bulgaria, Russia, Japan, Korea, Morocco, and Scandinavia. Many merchants traveled through Asia, Europe, and Africa to reach Baghdad, very often in long caravans, as group travel was sought to deter raids by thieves. A journey could take months, and the camels carrying the goods could tolerate the heat of the day and the cool of the evening. According to historical sources, a caravan would start its journey before dawn and travel up to 12 hours a day, while other merchants traveled by sea in trading ships, vessels, or warships. They traveled from the Persian Gulf ports of Siraf and Basra. Those coming from China brought silk, porcelain, furs, musk, paper, and ink. From India came spices, minerals, and dyes, while Central Asia was a source of various textiles and precious stones. Baghdad's markets overflowed with goods of all kinds and were divided according to specific themes. The streets were noisy and crowded with travelers and buyers. The most common goods were ivory, soap, honey, diamonds, glass, and tiles. Craft industries also flourished, such as metalworking, glass blowing, and leatherwork. The workshops produced soaps, copper lamps, scissors, knives, terracotta pots, and Syrian glass, which inspired the stained glass windows of European cathedrals after the advent of the Crusader. We can only imagine today the social and cultural interactions that animated the ancient city. In the 10th century, the area of Baghdad could have reached 7,000 hectares, 5 times the size of Constantinople. Few cities boast such a size and wonder. In its day, the city was home to 1 million people. Its mild climate, status as capital of the Abbasid Empire, and beating heart of the world of science attracted thousands of new inhabitants and visitors. In comparison, Paris and London were considered villages. Al-Mansur himself stated, "You are where you receive gifts from ships from the west across the Euphrates, where you receive goods from Egypt and Sham, and you still receive gifts from ships from China, India, and Abbasid across the Tigris." To get an idea of how people lived in a newly built city, a well-known Arab historian and geographer Yaqut al-Hamawi wrote, "The city of Baghdad formed two vast circles on the right and left banks of the Tigris, 12 miles in diameter. The numerous suburbs covered with German parks and beautiful promenades, and abundantly supplied with rich bazaars and mosques, and finely constructed baths stretched for a considerable distance on the both sides of the river. In the days of its prosperity, the population of Baghdad and its suburbs amounted to over 2 million. The Caliph palace stood in the middle of the vast parks, several hours in circumference, which alongside a menagerie and aviary included an enclosure for wild animals reserved for pursuit. The palace gardens were exquisitely decorated and adorned with plants, flowers, and trees. Reservoirs and fountains were surrounded by carved figures. On this side of the river stood the palaces of the great nobles. Huge roads, no less than 40 cubits wide, ran through the city or from one end to the other, divided into blocks or quarters, each under the control of an overseer or supervisor who looked after the cleanliness, hygiene, and comfort of the inhabitants. The city was almost inhabited by a small group of wealthy people and landowners who lived in great luxury, while most people worked 7 days a week. Some of them were surgeons, healers, while people in the guise of astrologers, dream interpreters, hypnotists entertained the wealthier classes with their knowledge. The lives of scholars, mathematicians, and poets, many of them from Persia, were greatly facilitated by the patronage of the Sultan, who welcomed them into the city's famous intellectual life. The Muslim essayist Al-Yahiz was bewildered by the city and reported, "I have seen great cities, including those known for their durable construction. I have seen many cities in the Strait of Syria, in Byzantine territory, other provinces, but I have never seen a city of greater height, more perfect circularity, and more endowed with supreme merits, or possessing more spacious gates or more perfect defenses than the city of Abu Ja'far al-Mansur." In Baghdad, the government financed scientists to translate the Greek works of Pythagoras and Aristotle into Arabic. The ancient theories formulated by the Greeks were tested using empirical methods, and the role of the scholar, and especially the role of interpreter, was highly respected and well remunerated. The ancient rulers of Baghdad were so passionate about knowledge that they preferred ancient texts to the spoils of war, and often requested works from larger cities such as Constantinople to carry out studies, research, and translations on them, one of which was Ptolemy's Almagest. Harun al-Rashid's son al-Mamun encouraged the translation of the ancient Greek works into Arabic. This period in history had the highest importance for the entire civilization, in which the compendium of scientific and literary disciplines adopted by the Arabs and translated will be the notions that will be disseminated years later in medieval Europe. Religious scholars, astronomers, with the poets and other craftsmen of Christian, Islamic, and Jewish faith thronged the city and coexisted peacefully in Baghdad's center of knowledge, known as the House of Wisdom. Al-Mahmud founded the House of Wisdom, an academic institute dedicated to translation, research, and education, and quickly became one of the most famous centers of learning, attracting scholars from all over the world of different cultures. It housed one of the largest libraries in the world at the time, an astronomical observatory, and the first hospital, where a sophisticated and modern healthcare system was adopted at no cost. Al-Ma'mun himself inherited from his father a private text collection consisting of rare books and collections of poetry in Arabic and Persian. In the House of Wisdom, teachers and students worked together to translate Greek, Persian, Syriac, and Indian manuscripts, studying the works of Aristotle, Plato, Hippocrates, Euclid, Ptolemy, Pythagoras, and Brahmagupta. The studied disciplines were logic, rhetoric, metaphysics, theology, algebra, geometry, trigonometry, physics, biology, medicine, and surgery. In 1234, the College of Mustansiriya was built on the eastern side of the Tigris. The complex was described by many sources as a large two-story structure with a large outdoor courtyard. The poorest students were provided with accommodation, food, a monthly dinner, medical care, and free tuition, while a sophisticated 12-door clock marked the hours of classes. The historian Baghdadi Ibn al-Futi described the college's clock. On the outer wall of this counter was a circle on which was a depiction of the sky, and on it were many finely decorated bronze arches, housing finely decorated doors. Inside the circle were two models of falcons made of gold, each inside a gold bow. Two bronze ball bearings were placed behind each falcon, so that they were not visible to the observer. At the expiration of an hour, the mouth of each falcon opened and ball bearings fell. Each time a ball bearing fell, one of the doors inside the arches opened. The doors had lasted but now became silver. When the ball bearings fell from the bows below, they returned to the original positions. Then the golden planets rise in the blue sky within this representation of the heavens at the same time as the true sun rises in the sky. They move across the clock face, mirroring the movement of the sun across the sky, descending and disappearing with the setting of the sun. When night comes, there are planets that gradually emerge to the light shining from behind them. The street of the light emitted by the disks of the planets gradually increases and reaches its maximum intensity at the end of a full hour. Then this process begins on the next planet, and so on until the night ends and the sun begins to rise. In this way, you can know the timing of the prayers. In the college, there were small classes of at least 10 students, and the curriculum that was studied included legal and religious linguistic subjects, but also arithmetic, the division of inheritance, topography, history, hygiene, poetry, plant and animal care, and natural history. Students were assigned a teacher, assistants, and a librarian, pens for writing, paper, and lamps. In Baghdad, there were many paper mills. Muslims learned the art of paper from the Chinese and turned it into an industry. The alternatives to paper at the time were fragile papyrus and expensive parchment. Paper was cheaper, and the quantity available allowed for all the necessary works. Baghdad in the 13th century is thought to have had 36 libraries, whose volumes were organized into specific genres and categories. In 1258, the golden age of Baghdad came to an abrupt end. The unstoppable Mongol advance at the end of Genghis Khan's grandson Hulegu, followed by an army of 150,000 men, conquered and besieged Baghdad. In the end of 1257, Hulegu sent a message to Caliph Mustasim asking him to open the gates of Baghdad to the Mongols and their Christian allies from Georgia. The Caliph did not comply with this warning and told him to back down. On 10 February, he surrounded, and 3 days later the army marched in, surrounded the capital and massacred the Caliph army that had gathered for negotiations. Baghdad held out for 12 days, but the Mongol army besieged the walls and collected the mountains of silver, gold, and jewelry. The Caliph was executed, and it is estimated that thousands of inhabitants were massacred. Mongol fury burned the great libraries, and in the indecipherable amount of texts were thrown into the Tigris. The quantity was so enormous that horses could walk on them, and the waters of the river turned black for months. This event was an enormous loss for the whole of humanity, and we can only imagine how much knowledge was lost that day. I wanted to leave you all with a question. How do you think we would understand the present if the knowledge accumulated by the wise men of Baghdad had come down to us intact? If you have reached this point of video, I invite you to leave a like and subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching!